community members involved. That's the full-time job of community school coordinators. They're the human bridge connecting all the partners and stakeholders that make community schools possible. So that's what makes a school a community school. Now, how do you pay for it? Startup costs like hiring a full-time coordinator can be raised from foundations or state and local governments. Tapping into existing funding and partnering with local businesses can bring in service providers. Sharing resources and staff with partners can help everyone do more. And as a community school becomes more established, leaders can advocate for budgets that sustain their impact and new funding to expand it. Every community school is different. What will yours be like? Get started at communityschools.futureforlearning.org.
All right, can folks hear me? Okay, good. So yeah, just wanted to do that overview real quick because in a lot of our full service community school organizing work, we see a common issue actually be there is not clear understanding of what a full service community school is. We have seen districts say we have one because we put a washing machine in our school. And it's just like, wait, no. It goes way deeper than that. There's a set of standards that exist. So no. So making sure everyone is also on the same page of what are some of the key pillars, as they name the 4 pillars of full service community schools, because that's going to be very crucial in going after the support as well. So now that we have that context, I would love to invite 2 of our former member leaders, Rhonda and Deanna, to talk about some of the ways in which they've supported full service community school expansion and support for the model, primarily in Brooklyn Center, as well as in Deer River. And I believe they are here. I think there's a way I can even spotlight them. If Rhonda or Deanna, if you are here, can you put like your hands up so I can view y'all? There we go, Rhonda. There we go. There we go. We have you spotlighted, and then I am looking for if Deanna has joined us. And if not, oh, there we go. We got you 2 right there. Perfect. So yes, I would love to have you 2 just speak a little bit about some of the work that you've done, and be it in Brooklyn Center, also in Deer River as leaders within the association and leaders in the communities around the full service community school models, and some of the experiences you've had and seeing it address some of the core issues that our students are facing, inside the classroom and outside the classroom. So I can't recall what order I shared in the email, but if Rhonda, you want to go do a brief introduction and share a little bit, and then Deanna, take it from there too.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Mard. I'm the president of the local Brooklyn Center, or Education Minnesota Brooklyn Center. And I've been in the district for 10 years, and our school has been in a community school a lot longer than that. So I can't kind of talk about how it became a community school, but I know we've always had a lot of support from our district leadership with regard to community schools, with our community school model. They're very much on board with it. And from my own personal experience, one of the things that's been really powerful during the pandemic with students is the wraparound services that our community schools model provides students. They have access to, especially we have our Teen Annex Clinic, and then the Health Resource Center, which means that the students have access to mental health help, and it's embedded into the school day. So it's minimally disruptive, which is different than if, for example, a student had to go to a therapy appointment off campus. That would make it more disruptive. And then some of the work that we've done as a local in partnering with community schools The biggest example I can think of was last year with our food giveaway and then our essential item drive. We had members and our community partners come together, and even what was basically a local event, our food giveaway, which we partnered with Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation. We actually got the community schools folks to come in, and they helped us to recruit a lot of our the people to work the event, and then we had members coming too. So we all were kind of working together, and there were a lot of members that were involved with the item giveaway that gave a lot of their time and sometimes resources and money as well. So it's something that as a school community we really have a lot of buy-in, and we can see a difference in the way our students approach school, and also it's nice to have, like I said before, that in-house the access to those wraparound resources. It's kind of like a one-stop shop. They don't have to leave campus for half a day to go to a dental appointment or to a doctor appointment, or it's right there. And that's just kind of the beginning of it. It's not just about the students, but also there are a lot of parent groups that do a lot of work in the district. And I think that also helps to give us better representation of parent voices in the district, because we have so many parent groups that are active, that partner with the community school partners. So.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I don't know, I know some of our staff also in May went out to Brooklyn Center to support some of these efforts. That was a very traumatizing moment for the student community out there. And for some context, Dante Wright was murdered by a Brooklyn Center police officer, and there was just a lot of trauma. And this was also happening during the George Floyd, well, let me not say trial, the trial of Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd. So to see Brooklyn Center, see our leaders like Rhonda and community partners and the full service community school leaders and our educators really come together to provide just such a needed refuge during that moment was really beautiful to see. So thank you so much, Rhonda. I want to pass it to Deanna to share a little bit about some of the work she's done also in Deer River.
Hi, a little bit different story in Deer River. We have been a full service school now for about 5 years. Definitely a grassroots kind of thing. About 6 years ago, we were doing a referendum for a remodel at the elementary school, and our superintendent reached out to some other people about some other things that maybe could be located in our building, which include a early childhood wing and a senior center. And so from that, we were able to get the referendum passed. And one of the things that was asked after we were working on the referendum was, what was our next challenge in Deer River? So we decided that we were going to explore the full service community schools, as we have a lot of students who come to school with barriers to learning, and so started doing research on the full service model. I have to say that Education Minnesota was very instrumental in helping us move forward with that. Admin gave us Carrie Lucking to help us do some work. We were able to go to some trainings and some full service community school things out of state. In 2015, we started our school. Initially, we had a coordinator, and we got a grant from MDE. And we used that to do 1.5 years of work and to do the needs assessment, which is, I think the two things for sure that you need to have when you're looking at a community school is you need to have a coordinator and you need to have a needs assessment, because we learned real quick that the things that sometimes you think are the needs aren't necessarily the needs when you go out and talk to your families. So 4 years ago, I was asked if I would be the community school coordinator in Deer River, and I accepted that position. For the first year, I was able to continue to be in the union as well as be the community school coordinator. We just got a new superintendent and he couldn't quite see how that would work. And so currently I am not in the union. It makes me very sad, but I still have, it was a huge thing to have been part of the union because all of the union members are all on board with the full service community school, and you need a lot of buy-in if you're going to do this. One of the things that Rhonda said that I think is really important is having these things on site. Like we have mental health in our buildings. We have like 5 mental health practitioners that work in our building. So students can see them. We have dental services that come in. We have an eye doctor that we work with so that somebody from the school can just take somebody over, quick appointment and come back. Let's see, a couple other things that I wanted to make sure is, I don't know if Robin knows, but right before this call, MDE sent out the RFP for the grants. So it's already out. And so you need to start talking to your members if there's schools that are interested, because there's money and there isn't always money available. Deer River was very fortunate. Last October, we received a federal grant for $2.5 million for 5 years. So we have money now. This is the beginning of our 2nd year. In Minnesota, there's a full service community school network. Brooklyn Center is part of it, Duluth, let's see, Rochester, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and Faribault. So hoping to get some more people involved in the full service work. And like I said, the fact that there's money available, if there's anybody who even vaguely looks like they're interested in full service, you should start working with them. I think that's about it. I just think it's really important to get it needs to come, I feel like it needs to come from within, not from the top down. I think community schools works a lot better with buy-in from teachers and everybody. One other thing that Rhonda mentioned about is our teachers are so good about, that's my we just had a family have a fire last week. And so I put out the email that we needed these things, and my teachers reach out to their connections. And I mean, within an hour, I had beds, I had $1,000. It's just amazing when everybody comes together to support your families. So that's my elevator speech.
It was a powerful elevator speech. I mean, you've perfected it over a number of legislative sessions too. We pull on you a lot. But thank you so much, Rhonda and Deanna. We want to also just have a moment for folks on the call. If you have any questions, just even between the video of like the full service community school model, or even in reference to some of the experiences that Rhonda and Deanna noted. And I just saw something in the chat. Okay, yes. So yes, if anyone has questions, if you would like to put stack in the chat, I can call on you. But yeah, just really a good time to ask from our leaders and former leaders themselves of how they've done some of this work. And Deanna has touched on a lot of it of the importance of having educator buy-in. And for this model to work best is to have it come from our educators, come from our students, not from administrators, that top-down approach. So yeah, if folks have questions, please put stack in the chat and I will call on you. Go for it, Amy.
Hey, Deanna, long time no see. Good to see you. Hi, Rhonda. I just had a question. One of the things that has come up is some of the folks I'm working with, like, should it be a whole district that does this, or should you focus in on a school? And so if you could maybe talk a little bit about sort of what it looks like in your area or what you might recommend.
So Amy, in Deer River, we started at the elementary. We have two buildings. We have a pre-K 5 and a 6-12. So we started in the elementary. The last couple of years, some of the high school teachers would reach out to me, but basically it was a King school. Last year we tried to ramp up, and now we're in both buildings. Surprisingly, and I don't know if anybody else finds this, but it's harder to do it in the high school. There's not as much buy-in to, it's a lot more of the, they should help themselves kind of thing, but we're working on it.
What's life without a few obstacles?
But I do believe, and please Rhonda speak on this, I think Brooklyn Center has the pipeline from elementary to high school. Yeah.
We're a small district like Deer River, and we have it in each building, and we have family resource centers located in each building as well. So.
And then I can ask my other question if you're okay with that, Robin. Rhonda, you had talked a little bit about student buy-in, and what are some ways in which students have been involved in the work of the full service community schools?
Well, students and families, we've, in fact, over the last year, we've actually increased student buy-in. We include students in things like our, if we have like a faculty meeting, sometimes we include students when we interview teachers. We have students that are representatives, which is really, I was just in an interview recently that was really interesting because of that. And it went a totally different direction because of the students being there too. So student voice is really important throughout our district, but I think that that comes in part from our community schools model.
Amy, I think one of the things that I didn't mention before is the whole relationship building. This is a huge relationship thing. And I've gone through, built relationships with families and students, and then they've been the ones to come to me to tell me about another family or another student, or they're willing to, introduce me to someone, or, hey, you should go see Deanna, she can help you out. So that kind of thing. We haven't gotten to the part yet where we have students like part of our leadership or anything yet, but we're working on that. But I think just even, having students know that they can come to us and ask for things or refer somebody else is really big too.
I was just going to add, it's when you're a teacher, sometimes if you're at a regular school, you might feel really powerless because kids have so many needs, and your first thought as a teacher is to fix it, right? And then you don't always have the ability to do that. Well, at a community school, you have all these wonderful community partners that you can reach out to get help. So that's really, and then if students are aware of that it helps to get them to buy into the idea of, it's pretty cool to go to a community school.
Thanks for that question. Paul, I see you're on stack, and if we have time probably for 2 more questions, if anyone want to get on stack too.
This is awesome. Thank you guys. I was, when we were advocating at the Capitol for this, we sometimes use graduation data. But have you guys collected any other data around, like, has attendance increased for certain kids, or how was attendance last year during the pandemic, or discipline or anything like that would maybe help tell the story a little better of like why it's so great also for kids? So thanks.
So we have some data that shows attendance. So we have, Deer River has a pretty high chronic attendance. We're like higher than the state average. And before the pandemic, we were starting to show some differences because part of our full service is to like go pick up kids. If you live, 30 miles away from school and you miss the school bus and your parents don't have a vehicle, you're pretty much done for the day. And so we were starting to show some progress with that. But then with the pandemic last year, I don't know. So we're starting from scratch again with those same students, but we definitely a year ago had some good data to show that we were making a difference with the chronic absence.
I can't really speak to specific data, but I know that it is a lot easier when you have relationships with community members to reach out and pull kids back in. That's what I can say about it.
And I do want to highlight for Brooklyn Center, when Patrice Howard was overseeing the schools, I know that there was a research report that was carried out that we've used in previous legislative sessions to complement Education Minnesota. You know, we did an EPIC project on full service community schools that were looked at trends across the nation, and we used a lot of the data from Brooklyn Center as well. And I believe Achievement Plus have started to gather some data. And that is one point that I think the coalition has been working on, of how we're really good at producing like the anecdotal and qualitative stories that like Deanna mentioned, of like a kid needed, you know, a ride to school because transit is not reliable in some areas. So that's what we got for you, legislator. And folks are like, well, how about attendance and graduation and all those things? So I know some sites do have that. In case in these grant applications, if you want to refer to like, you know, a site like Brooklyn Center or even Rochester, we have information that you can pull from that says like, look, other districts are trying this, they've seen progress. We should still look at doing this too. And thank you, Andrea, for dropping the EPIC paper. Any other last questions before we move on to the second part of our agenda? It's a really good time to hear directly from our own educators who've been doing some of this work as well. Like awkward teacher pause.
I was just going to say that the person of contact in Brooklyn Center to learn more about our community school model is Renee Starr, and you can find her information. I can put the link for the website. Let's see. For people, if they want more information about specifically Brooklyn Center.
And as Deanna noted too, Education Minnesota has been really crucial in supporting the statewide coalition for full service community schools. They meet every quarter, or it's been much more frequent. So some of the leaders that are involved in the day-to-day operations of the full service community schools site, they're a part of that coalition. And if you have questions, we're more than willing to, and we, like me, will be more than willing to connect you with folks at those sites as well. So thank you for dropping that information. And thank you so much, Rhonda and Deanna, for just taking the time. I know school started today. It's busy. So again, just a testament to like the amazing work that our teachers are always doing, of like exhaustion, but still showing up to share about the great work that you all are doing.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, Robin.
Awesome, awesome. So many thanks to those both of those member leaders. And in terms of the second part of the agenda, we want to get into the nitty gritty of what it looks like to expand or sustain the model itself. And I will send out a PowerPoint. Right now we have 18 sites across the state. So some of you might actually be supporting a local in an area or a district that has a full service community school site. And this is an opportunity for you to go after some of these funds to either grow the model or to actually support the existing sites. But one of the things that we want to touch on, and I'm glad that Deanna brought it up, and we got a timely email from Kevin, is the fact that there's a grant that's open right now and it's live. They're calling for RFPs, and unfortunately, the deadline, I believe, Kevin, y'all correct me, you said October 8th. So very short turnaround. But we are more than willing to support any local that's here. Thank you, Rhonda. I know you got a busy day. Thank you for coming by. But we're talking about partnering with Education Minnesota's foundation to see if we can bring in a grant writer to do a grant writing workshop, or any of our locals that's interested in partnering with their districts to go after some of these funds as well. So that is one clear opportunity that's available to us right now, to go after some of this funding. But I want to pass it to Andrea to also talk about the bargaining pathway, which actually can complement the grant process too. So I will pass it to Andrea to talk a little bit more about that part.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me or don't recognize my voice, I'm on the tail end of a nasty cold. Andrea Ciccone, I work in our negotiations department, and in thinking about the work that Robin has been leading to try to expand this model across the state, that our lobby team does at every legislative session, we've talked an awful lot about like where across the country are unions putting a proposal on the table to build these models out. And it's actually pretty common that unions and districts bring this issue from either side, from either the management side or from the union side. This is actually, I think, an issue that can bring a lot of collaboration around. Sometimes I think our locals do feel pretty that we're in a difficult spot in bargaining. And this is potentially a place where you can see a little bit more collaboration happen between districts and unions. And one of the things I want to say up front for leaders, for staff, just to name this perspective. Very often when we think about bargaining, we think about sort of the scope of issues being working conditions, compensation, benefits. But in Minnesota, like the only prohibited subject of bargaining is pension contributions and stuff that's not legal. Everything else is permissive. Everything else is a possible thing for us to talk about. And that doesn't need to start with, here is a detailed proposal of what our community school is going to look like. In fact, it shouldn't start with that, right? It should start with, here is an endeavor we would like to pursue together. Whether that's initially about funding, whether that's about a specific position. So I think this is in the agenda. I'm going to sort of just add this to the chat as some ideas for us to think about when it comes to bargaining. The big question is, if you pursue a full service community school model for a building, for several buildings, for district-wide, how do you sustain it? How do you create it and how do you sustain it? And that's going to look different in every district. So just like we wouldn't go out and say there's a one size fits all approach to just about anything in negotiations, neither would we do that with full service community schools. But when you unpack some of the questions around how you bring an issue like this to the table, here's some things that come up. What does decision-making look like in a full service community model? Do we have a site-based governance team and who serves on that? So just as if we would set up a labor management collaboration between with district representation, with parent collaboration, with student voice, with our own members' voices, we would want to make a decision. We would want to make a decision with the folks who we're in partnership with. How are we going to make sure that the school is operational? Do we have a specific site team who serves on that site team? What's our shared accountability around this? Like, who makes the decisions? What timelines do we use? What process do we use to come to an agreement? All of those things are questions that can be part of either sort of at the table negotiations or side negotiations. I think another big question is, what does staffing look like for this? I think we heard from Rhonda and from Deanna. I think the most essential thing to focus on is that coordinator position to really focus the energy of a full service community school and be that focal point for families, for students, for staff to do all the coordination that you heard about from our members. I can tell you, when I was in Brooklyn Center volunteering this spring, it was remarkable what they achieved up there in part because they knew who the folks were. They had a coordinated model in place, and everybody was able to sort of look to one person or a team of people to say, this is what's in place. I think also when it comes to staffing, it's not just being able to say, these are the services that we want to bring in, but other than the coordinator, what positions do our members, do our students and families need? Do we need to make sure that mental health is prioritized? Does that come from a partnership, or does that come from a counselor that we need to hire in order to support this model, right? Like, those are questions that can be negotiated as well, or at least can be part of that bargaining discussion. I would also name Wink, you mentioned this earlier, that a really critical piece of this that Deanna talked about was a community needs assessment. And I think in bargaining, we could talk about, how are we going to do a community needs assessment? What does it look like? What model are we using? How are we getting it in the field? Are we doing it with door knocking? Are we doing it with, focus groups and individual meetings? Are we doing that through a survey model? Like, what does it look like for us to do a community needs assessment? And that's actually something that we can support through Education Minnesota as well. But those are questions that I think can be asked in the bargaining relationship. I think another really critical piece of this is compensation. We're really good at bargaining compensation at Education Minnesota, right? So what is the compensation for our staff and for community members who are involved in this? Very often, I think we have the power to say, if we're going to have an accountability model that involves families being represented, community partners who are represented, what compensation do we offer those folks for the time that they invest? Those are questions that you can answer and you can enshrine overall in an MOU. And there is absolutely no reason under the sun that we can't enshrine in some kind of agreement between us and the district an ongoing financial commitment. And so what that could look like is, we agree that we're going to pursue this grant to fund for the first 3 years of an expansion or the creation of a new site. Or we are going to agree that we're going to spend, the district's going to allocate and reserve $50,000 for full service community schools each year, with the rest to be allocated through a foundation grant or federal money, or like whatever, right? Like the specifics get worked out in those discussions. And so I think those are questions that I want folks to really consider as maybe not traditional negotiation. Maybe in traditional negotiation, what we bring to the table is a blanket memorandum of understanding that says we're going to spend the next year pursuing this grant from the Department of Ed, any additional federal funding, with a goal to implement a full service community school next year. And in the process of working through that collaboration, the questions that we just named get worked out, right? So I think those are important questions to have in mind. And I don't think that's an exhaustive list. I think that's a beginning list for us to think about. And I see lots of wisdom represented in the faces on the screen. And so again, not an exhaustive list. There's many, many other questions that could get addressed, but we have a contract. We have a powerful tool to make demands, to bring proposals, to generate ideas. And I think we can talk a little bit later about like how do we get started in doing that? And something as simple as a proposal to the district that says, we propose that we work together on implementing a full service community school using this grant process from the state, naming the timeline that we want to be on and moving it that way. That's absolutely possible. And we can certainly support that. I'm happy to write that MOU, right? So I think just those are some specifics for us to start thinking about. So Robin, I'll turn that back to you to talk a little bit more about what we know about the grants. And then we can talk a little bit about next steps sort of internally.
Yes, thank you for that. And in terms of what I know, it's actually probably from the link that Andrea just literally put into the chat. We literally just got word that these applications went live about 30 minutes ago. So what we know so far is, again, applications are live. The deadline is October 8th. MDE is going to have 2 webinar sessions on September 15th and the 16th that kind of does a broad overview of what the RFP is requesting from districts. So we'll send all this information out to everyone as well. But that is a really good opportunity if you're wanting to know what is actually required of you what information do you need to start gathering if this is something that you as a local want to do in partnership with your district? Like, what is that information you need to start gathering prior to the deadline? And as I mentioned earlier, we have worked with the coalition before in providing grant writing support because we know that is the major funding piece of the full service community school model because we went 5 years without any state investment. So a lot of our actual site coordinators also had to become grant writers. So we are here to also offer some support to you all if that is something that is needed, and do a workshop with a professional grant writer to support you in that process. But definitely recommend attending the webinars. Apparently they're not going to be recorded. Not surprised by that. And then it also seems that there is also some stipulations around the amount that a district can request. It seems like the minimum that you can request, which is justifiable, is 300,000. So as Andrea mentioned, I think the bargaining aspect is really crucial to say, you know, once the state investment is gone, like if you go after 300,000 and say a big piece of this is to support hiring a site coordinator and doing a community needs assessment. What needs to also be negotiated is once that grant is gone, how will we sustain that? And that's actually, I wish something that Deanna could have brought up because that's exactly what happened in Deer River. Once the state grant was gone, luckily there was so much buy-in by the superintendent, by our educators, by the students, that the district actually decided to make this a budget item for them. So they sustained it themselves, as opposed to, outsourcing it to philanthropic entities to resource it. So that is something to definitely negotiate because what we also don't want is for these funds to, be done and then we see the model just disappear, which did happen. It happened in Minneapolis once the 2-year grant ran out. So we also don't want to replicate that. We want to create sustain and longevity within this model for our students. So again, we'll send that information out to everyone that's on this call and that signed up and have interest. And then does anyone have any questions about the grant or some of the things that Andrea mentioned around bargaining before we talk about next steps? And if you have any questions, please drop stack in the chat box.
Then I don't want to forget to mention, in addition to this dedicated funding that exists at the state level, the state's $5 million appropriation, I know you are all desperately sick of me talking about the American Rescue Plan and the funding associated with it. But it's still true that there has been an investment from the federal government made to districts. Districts may or may not have already submitted a plan to the state for how they want to use those funds. But another source of funding is, in fact, that direct payment to school districts. Absolutely one of the allowable uses, and in fact, one of the encouraged uses in Minnesota's own state plan to the feds is to use ARP funding to support full service community schools. There is also nothing that says that the plan that a district submitted in June, if they got really excited, couldn't be amended to say, by the way, now that we know that there's $300,000 potentially available as a grant, we want to allocate another $200,000 from our ARP allocation to support that work, right? That is an absolute possibility, and I don't want to leave that money on the table. So just putting that in the mix.
Yes, go for all the money available. Don't leave any dollars or coins on the table. This is the time, especially something to note about these grants for the full service community school side of things. It's one-time funding. So this is it. There's not a continuous appropriation of this funding. I mean, we would love to see added investment during the next legislative session, but this is what we have right now. So we want to make sure that we're going after the dollars and really using this as an opportunity to advance a model that we know works for our families and works for our students. So any questions before we move on to next steps in our last 10 minutes? Second teacher pause. And feel free to, if it does come up, feel free to drop it in the chat box regardless. But the next piece that we want to talk about is the crucial aspects of prior to going after a grant or going after a bargaining avenue around full service community schools. Two key things that we would encourage everyone to do is doing outreach to our members or your members and outreach to district leaders. Again, it's very important to make sure that we have that buy-in from all of the stakeholders that are going to be involved in rolling out this process. And again, the two key folks is definitely our members. We want them to be on our sides. We want them to be fully invested when we have to do trainings, when community partners, and I will say this is so important, but when like community partners come in and they need to take up space and do events and stuff, we do not want our educators being like, who are these people in the building? It's just like, these people are helping our students, and that has happened. So I am going as an example. So I know, yes. So we want to make sure all of our staff is on board and understand, and knowing that it comes from a place of trauma of like our districts are often doing a number of initiatives and programs every single year that they're asking our educators, not asking, but basically are imposing on our educators. And there's no type of democratic engagement with our educators about these initiatives. And then they'll stick around for a year or two and then they leave. So knowing that that's a trauma response, of like knowing this is not just another thing that we're asking our educators to do or be subjected to, like this is actually something that we support and we know has worked for our students. So getting that buy-in. And Andrea, if you want to touch a little bit more on, okay, some of those things, we put it in terms of like the next steps around doing that for district leaders and for our members.
I want to actually just lift up something Robin just said, like, you know, when our members, I think our members have a feeling of just being constantly imposed upon, because it's true, right? And for the last 18 months, they've been imposed upon by a global pandemic, right? So this is, this could feel very much like one more thing on their plate. But I think, you know, Wink talked about like, what does it look like to have graduation rates, or what does attendance look like in full service community schools? I'm really interested in what employment looks like in full service community schools. Is there better retention of educators because more needs are met, because there are more avenues for problem solving? And I think anecdotally, we have good information that suggests, yeah, people like working in these models. It's easier to do your job and to feel successful when in fact you have a set of supports that are sort of embedded in this model. So I want to just name that again. In terms of next steps, I think for those folks on the call who are leaders, if you think this is a good idea, like, don't sit on it, right? That's a conversation to go to your fellow leaders of your union, to go right away to your district and say, have you heard about this? We are very interested in pursuing this model. We'd like to talk about what that looks like. We'd like to jointly attend one of these webinars on the 15th or the 16th. We can bring support from Education Minnesota in terms of the grant writing, in terms of connecting to other through the coalition that Robin specifically can help connect. We'd love to do a site visit to Brooklyn Center or to Deer River or to Rochester, Duluth. There are places that we can arrange a site visit. We can arrange for conversations if you'd like to know more about what that looks like. I think we can also, we have tremendous organizers and field staff, many of whom are on this call, who can help facilitate those conversations with members. If you're having beginning of the school member meetings, just taking 30 seconds to say, we as a local union are really interested in pursuing a model that could provide more and different support for our students. What do you think our students most need right now? Like just an open question like that. We're happy to support any of that work, depending on kind of what the appetite is in your district. But again, there's money now. So this is the moment to sort of think about it. And if you work, so for field staff and specifically, if you work with a local that you think really might be interested in pursuing this, do reach out to us. We're happy to help you craft that MOU, to help think through what the conversations might look like with members, to do any of that outreach. Those, this is important stuff. It's a short timeline, and we can figure out what it looks like to support any specific district that you want to talk through. I think that's it, Robin.
And once again, we'll put in the follow-up email, we'll share a link to this recording, but also summarize some of the things that Andrea just shared around ways in which we can support you in doing some of that outreach to your leaders, to your members. Also to connect you to the statewide coalition, because they're more than welcome to host you for a site visit. Also recognizing we're still in a pandemic. If we need to do virtual tours, those are things that we can definitely make happen as well. You know, this pandemic has taught us to be very adaptive. We want to make sure that we're using our coalition, the fact that we have 18 sites that are doing well, like how to leverage that to support you all and going after this funding to either support an existing site or even create a new site, because it comes with a lot of uncertainties. We know district leaders might be like, what is this? This feels like something else to do. It's just like, no. We have folks like Deanna and Rhonda, who's the president of our union, who can attest to just the amazing benefits that they've been able to experience as educators and see, you know, the improvements it's made in the lives of their students and their parents. So we'll summarize this in email after this meeting. And yes, want to be called upon to support you all in any way possible. In going after this magical, you know, infusion of money. Before we depart, any questions, burning questions? Your 20-second teacher pause. Also, as something else to know, if folks are still marinating or if they want to question or not, I really encourage folks, and I'll attach it to the follow-up email, to check out that Excel doc that Andrea put together that lists all the districts that either have indicated interest in doing a full service community school site or in the locations that have existing sites, so that you can also see for yourself, you know, if there's already interest in it, I think that makes it a lot easier for you to approach your local leaders and say, look, we've learned that you've reached out to MDE about pursuing a full service community school. We would like to, you know, collaborate more with you about that. So I'll include that spreadsheet again, but definitely encourage you to check that out to get a sense of where your district is and if they're already like engaged and interested in this model. But if there's no questions, and feel free to reach out to me or Andrea, again, follow up. You get to have 1 minute back in your life. Thank you for sharing all the links, Andrea. And thank you to everyone who made time to join us, especially on the first day back for many of you to school. So thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Also, Andrea, are you able to stay on for like a couple minutes? Okay, cool. All right, y'all, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.